knockout or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can
so
talk for a little bit, and then yeah, then I gotta go sleep.
cool. Yeah, you just let me know when you gotta be out.
I'd say
But
like
anyway, I was
something like half an hour or something like that can do. But yeah,
oh
I just started
okay,
my stream.
cool. Okay, cool. We'll do like a quick one then. So yeah, yesterday I re-listened to our little conversation there, and yeah, I was kind of like rushed. It was kind of like impromptu on my phone and stuff like that, and I was
This is
also
definitely a better
kind of
connection.
yeah, yeah. It was a better connection. I'm more like kind of relaxed and just
Mm,
have time. There was some times where I think I wasn't really hearing you,
mm,
and I didn't give good responses that would have wanted to if I was properly hearing you. So now, um, there was like a couple things I wanted to pick from that conversation
yeah,
yesterday that
no, that's a great place
stuck
to start.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but first, like, were you surprised when I told you yesterday that women aren't actually blocked from the pro leagues?
In like you're talking about
Like
in
NFL,
like NFL,
NBA.
NBA.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I wasn't. I didn't know that, but I wasn't that
Oh,
surprised. But I also just I don't follow like most really any professional sports that
gotcha.
all that closely. So
Uh-huh.
um,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because well, going over when I kind of like researched this topic, I didn't know that either,
Mm,
right? And then I kind of like stumbled onto it and I was like, "Oh, no kidding." Like none of these are called the men's league,
mm-hmm.
so it makes sense. They're all just called the pro leagues. There's no actual rule stating that women are excluded from competing in the pro league. So it's all just a matter of um, that to me, just learning that kind of validated even further for me the importance of women's sports for cis women,
Mm-hmm.
um, and why, and that's why I thought longer about it, and I think that even if we let in one trans woman who wasn't good as a male and wasn't good or was even worse as a female competitor,
Mm-hmm.
I would still not let that happen because it would be a slippery slope. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, that's
it,
a. I think that's a. If you if you're willing to follow that all the way down, I think that's a fair argument. You're saying, okay, if there's some um, statistically unlikely event that some number of trans women are competing and they're not doing especially well compared to the cis women in their league, it could normalize trans women competing, and then there could be a kind of a tidal wave of trans women in the future who might just be
just
massively out
abolish the
competing
sport. Yeah.
all the cis women there. And so even if
Yeah, it would
trans
end
people right
women's
now
sports potentially.
aren't in that position, maybe in the future they would be when I don't know,
Correct.
maybe more people join or whatever, some future
Yeah.
time. Um, I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's I don't think that's a ridiculous argument, but I think it's a little bit incomplete because you would have to demonstrate some connection to some future thing that would cause that to be the case. So it's like,
Mm.
um,
Well,
right.
uh-huh.
So we looked at Leah Thomas, and actually I was very surprised that you did not only know about that case, but know that what when conservatives talk about her and use her as an example of trans people kind of taking over league, that you actually knew that was false. That she was basically in the same kind of same position, going from competing as a man in a men's league to after a couple of years of taking hormones, competing as a woman in the women's league. She was in like a similar overall ranking between those those times.
Mhm.
So
So
I
I have
was
a
impressed that you
question.
knew that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now I did know that, but um I'm not clear on everything about that case. So
Hmm.
I let me ask you,
Yeah.
um, did she achieve equal or higher wins as a trans woman than a male, than when she was male?
Right. So did she relatively improve from one to the other, like within those rankings, within those leagues?
Like
Is
even
there a
even if
question?
it was just one, yeah, like let's say even if it was just one race or something, um, was it like that where she showed a significant um improvement like from previous like her performances as a man?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think her actually here. Let me just pull this up so I give like actual specific
'Cause
information
I
rather
did
than
hear
trying to
this one,
remember.
because all I heard was this one story about one of her competitors that was very
She
unhappy,
was very
saying that
salty. Um,
she lapped she lapped the competition, like somebody the next person behind her was behind her by like 25 seconds or something like that, or it was like,
so just like on the basic kind of ranking level. So when she was competing as a man in the men's league, she so there's I think it's the same. I just want to make sure I'm lining these up. It's 200, 500, and 1650 freestyle. Those are like the um, two category or three categories that she's competing in. So she was going from uh, I'm trying to parse this this paragraph of text and pull out the times. Um,
yeah.
so
Did
in
she
one of
break
them, she
records
was
while
I think it was like six, yeah, 6 second and first was it?
this is as
Uh,
after um
or no, she was no, she was first for 500, first for 1,000, first for 1650, but sixth in 200. So this is pre-transition as a man competing in the men's league,
mm,
and then so this was in her um, let's see 2018 to 2019. I'm trying to line these up. So she started freshman year, and then this was sophomore year, um, and then she was let's see and she was transitioning for a couple of years, and I think still she was still on the men's team while she was transitioning because they have like a hormone cutoff. Um, and during that transition time, um, yeah, her time was over 15 seconds slower than her personal best before medically transitioning. So
well, that
she got
it's not
weaker.
really
She
about,
um,
yeah, but it has to be relative to the competition. I wouldn't
no,
really take, yeah.
wait. So
So if I got like
you're jumping the
10%
gun.
weaker, I would still,
So you're
okay.
going one step further. I'm just saying that there's evidence in her times that when she transitioned, um, she got slower.
Sure, because you're
And of
you,
course you're asking, is it slower enough to make sense for her to be in the women's category, which is fair. But I just want
well,
to
I already know the answer to that, but yeah.
and
Uh,
what's the answer to that?
well, the answer is obviously, like, remember when yesterday we were talking about the trans MMA fighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying it seemed like you were alluding to this point you were making, to you were trying to make. I think, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but it you gave like this Mike Tyson example,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you were trying to allude to the fact that it was maybe the skill level, not the unfairness.
No, that wasn't
Like,
what I was
or
saying.
okay,
So what I was
okay.
saying was I was probing a little bit what your argument was, which is this kind of like feels over reals thing, where it's like if somebody feels like the competition that they're in is unfair, that their opponent is cheating, then that means that they probably are. And I was saying, okay, well, is that something that we can really hang our hat on? If somebody, had to fight Mike Tyson for the first time, could they have a similar
Oh,
feeling?
I see what you mean.
Right?
I see what you mean. Okay,
Yeah.
so I definitely don't agree that it's like feels, because if just a rule change, an overnight rule change can definitely still make somebody feel like they're being cheated, even when, especially in this specific case, right? Because the women are competing in a space where there are certain guardrails up, right? So the guardrails protecting women are put up so that no biological man can fight against them.
I
And
I don't I don't I
I'm
don't I don't agree with that as a historical um, as like a historical description of why women's leagues exist. I did a little bit of reading on this just because I was curious. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but it seems like women's leagues were something that started being created at a collegiate level because women wanted to compete, and originally women weren't allowed in college, and then we started being allowed in college. They weren't allowed to play sports because it was unladylike, and they certainly weren't allowed to play with the boys because that's very unladylike. So leagues of their own were created. Um, I don't I don't think it's historically accurate that there were initially open leagues and then women's leagues were created to protect them. Um, so the
Whoa, that's
causality
not
of
what I was
that.
saying.
Well, these are
That's
things that were
I
put in
wasn't
place
saying
to protect women. I think that that's not. Um, I don't
right,
think
but
that
hold
there's
on,
anything to
that's different.
support that causality.
That's different. That's not the same thing. It's kind of like drug laws that were created. You could say that, yeah, initially they were created by the Nixon administration to target hippies and black people,
Sure.
right? But then if you fast forward till to today, that's not the reason we have drug laws. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm. Okay. I feel like this is I don't necessarily agree with you, but I feel like this would be an entire other conversation. Um,
I,
so
I feel like it's directly analogous unless you can
well,
pick
I,
a.
I mean, uh, can you make that a little bit more concrete of of
Sure.
of
So
of, of
today
why
we
why
have.
they aren't right? Because it's the case today that, for example, you know, um, arrests concerning use or possession of marijuana are very very um, skewed based on racial lines, but the rates of use among say black and white Americans are pretty comparable, right?
So this is
So
a an entire other
yeah, exactly.
conversation we
So
can get
so I'm saying
into,
I'm not
and
sure if this will
I'm
help
yeah,
resolve this other issue because I think
I'm
we'll have
we disagree
a pretty
here,
deep conversation
but
here.
I'm
Yeah.
delighted to have this conversation at a different time. But
hmm
just I'm just going to agree to disagree, because there are reasons. I do have answers for you there.
hmm I'm sure you do.
It's and I I, I really I have both anecdotal and statistical. But anyway, it would be the spirit of my analogy still matches whether or not you agree with the marijuana part. There are still other drugs that we agree maybe should be illegal. I don't know if you're a drug apt like
Like
I'm
a
not
like
sure what your
a
stance
drug
is
law
on.
abolitionist. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I would go that far like immediately on everything, right? But I
Hmm.
think it does seem the case, with different countries that have experimented with kind of tuning up how anti-drug versus more legalization, treating it more as like a health issue rather than a criminal issue. It does seem to be the case that treating it as like a health issue leads to less gang power, less violence. Um,
Hmm.
so it does seem like the criminalizing approach is counterproductive.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say immediately get rid of all drug laws everywhere all at once. I think it would need to be done
Okay.
in a thoughtful, careful way. But
Okay. So
yeah,
so far we can still agree on this analogy then, that even though drug laws might have been put in place for, bigoted reasons or whatever, and initially, doesn't mean that today those are still the reasons we have certain drug laws.
um,
You, like if we were to talk about
I,
meth,
I agree with the
something like
overall
that.
principle that something can be created for a bad reason, but it doesn't always stay that way. But I don't think drug laws are a great example in the same way that you could say that the origins of police were slave catchers, but they're not that today. But a lot of people don't feel like it's 100% separated, right? So,
That's
um,
actually not entirely true either, but okay, I see.
mhm,
I know of that argument that
mhm.
you're
I
suggesting.
just think
But
that
I mean,
particular example doesn't. Um,
I think the reason why maybe you don't agree is because you don't agree with
Well, I agree.
the
I
overall
agree with the overall principle. I don't think the historical context of something says what it will be for all of time, right? So, but I'm just I was calling into question with my historical background that I was describing for women's sports leagues. Why I don't
Sure.
think the characterization of these are things that were put in place to protect women. I don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's
Well,
the causality.
I'll
I don't
just
think that
ask
that's
you.
historically how that happened.
Uh-huh. I
Right.
mean, I'm not saying historically. It doesn't really matter to me how it historically happened, but it's the reasoning of today, I think, is more important. So, why do you think, um, let's say for the last 20 or 30 years, um, why do you think the women's league exists?
Why do I think the women's league exists?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's a broad question because it's a commercial entity. It's a the right professional leagues
For
are a
the
lot
for
of
the women
different
that want
things all at once.
okay, how
Um,
about for the just for the women
but
that want to participate in it?
sure.
Um,
I mean,
what?
I think this is where we're again going to run into. I really do conceptualize things somewhat differently. I'm not 100% convinced that the differences, the very clear and inarguable differences that we see between the level of performance in the NBA versus the WNBA, right? The fact that those
Right.
differences exist, um, I I'm not convinced that at the very least the level of the magnitude of difference between those is
Huge.
is simply the result of, oh, this is the performance that women could possibly attain playing basketball. This is the performance that men could possibly attain. So let me give a couple things to try to explain why this isn't some crazy statement, right? So
Mm,
when we look at Olympic performance, something like running or swimming or um, I don't know, probably strength training, lifting, Olympic lifting, lots of different categories. What we see is um, the the differences from one year to another in time reductions, for example, are really hard fought. It's really hard to go, 2 seconds faster in a sprint, right? But once somebody does it, pretty much everybody does it the next year. So if you look historically going back, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever, the times are are kind of dramatic in how different like the best person in a race 20 years ago versus like the worst person in a race today. So it,
mm,
it seems like there's a lot that goes into sports technique that is down to who's training you, kind of who you're training with. It seems like it's pretty hard. So I can give a personal. I do taekwondo. I've competed. I do sparring.
Cool.
Um, it's tough to
A lot of
go.
footwork.
Yeah, a lot of footwork. It's tough to go beyond your kind of training environment, right? To innovate, to go out on your own, to push your technique beyond what the people around you are doing is really, really tough. So to make new innovations, to push the entire field ahead is really tough. But if you train with like a more advanced group of people, you can maybe make massive gains very quickly. And so the fact that sports are segregated means that girls and
Well,
women aren't
they're
able
not.
to train. Um, they're segregated
There's just a
at
league
like
that
early
women
levels.
can
So
join.
you're talking about pro leagues, but in school, in most schools, in terms of like elementary, high school, um, college,
I think
I
up
think
to
they
high school,
are.
once they get to high school, they start to segregate by the sexes. Yeah,
Hmm. Um,
because that's when the kids start hitting puberty,
hmm.
and that's when the males, have they gain a huge
Hmm.
advantage
I
over
mean,
the
there's
females.
different growth spurts at different times, and there's like logistical things within that. But at a certain point, girls and boys, men and women stop training together for whatever reason that is. Right? We could look into that in more detail and
There's
kind of
only
flesh out
one.
what those are. Um,
There's only one reason,
there's only one reason, which is performance.
which is basically so remember in the analogy of the MMA fighter, you were saying, so is this like akin to someone feeling like they're fighting someone who's juiced or on steroids? So when
Hmm.
boys go through puberty, that's literally like being on a multi-year cycle of steroids.
Hmm.
And women just simply don't get the same. They have drastically different puberties. One
Hmm.
just grants boys an incredible athletic advantage over them.
Hmm.
Could you think? I mean, there's not another. It's more like to protect the girls, because if they don't segregate them at their most rowdy age, where they're also getting a strength increase that maybe their maturity hasn't caught up with, it could be a dangerous environment for young
Sure.
girls.
So what you're saying makes sense. Um, what I want to know is it empirically true? Has it been tested? Those are the kind of
Sure,
things that matter more to me
sure.
than like
You could
a
look
very
into
plausible
any
explanation, right?
biological, yeah, you could look into any like biological like literature, and that goes into boys and girls puberty, and you could see the
Well, no, no, no.
differences.
So I'm not saying empirical differences in development of boys and girls. I'm talking about um, I'm talking about empirical differences of okay, you wouldn't be able to run it maybe this cleanly in a society, but just to give an example of what I'm talking about as an experiment, um, if you had um, I don't know, in you took one entire state and you say, okay, we're not going to segregate girls and boys at all in, and somebody here is saying, confusing PE with sports. I'll read their statement in a bit. Um,
Oh, I see that. Yeah, that. Well,
Little leagues don't let girls play with boys. Junior highs, boys and girls teams not mixed unless it's a fun sport. So yeah, so in general, yeah, kids have always been segregated in sports. Yeah. Um,
it's for safety reasons.
well, sure, sure, sure. But what I'm saying is, let's say you did have them train together. For me, a plausible outcome. One thing that I um, wouldn't be, massively, unbelievably surprised by is that um, girls and women would come out of that at a higher competency level than what they would be in mixed leagues, which also historically have gotten just less resources, less focus, maybe less good coaches. I won't stand
So
by that 100%. But
yeah, so have you?
does that make sense?
You're saying that if something is preventing, so you're saying if segregation starts at a young age
Mm-hmm.
for the women, that
Mm-hmm.
they will fall behind in skill level. I don't think that actually holds any truth to it, because there's some people who are just a natural or just like good at things, and it doesn't really matter that. And I mean, there are
Well,
some great
hold on.
women coaches and stuff like that.
Everybody is subject to their training environment. Mike Tyson, if he hadn't had an incredible trainer, he wouldn't be the incredible fighter he is today. Maybe he'd be pretty good. Maybe he'd be really good, but he wouldn't be the however many times world champion if he hadn't had a really good trainer. If
Well,
he'd had a mediocre or a terrible trainer, he wouldn't be the
we'll
world
kind of
champion.
never know, right? I mean, he was really a phenom. I don't know if I don't know how much credit we can give to the trainer. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's you in the ring. Um,
Sure.
you could
I mean, so
you could
the
give a great trainer and to somebody, and they'll never make it as far
Oh,
as
sure.
Mike
No, no, no.
Tyson. You know?
I mean, to get okay, I think to get the world champion, you need an excellent trainer with a stupendous fighter, right? You can't take average Joe and give them the best trainer in the world, and they're going to be great, obviously, right?
Okay,
And which
that's a fair
matters
point.
more, the fighter or the trainer? I don't know. I'm not trying to say one or the other, but I'm just saying that if you have somebody who's a natural talent, but you don't give them the resources to succeed. You don't give them the training to make the most out of their natural technique. They're not going to reach as high. And the empirical point I was making about the Olympics, where those tiny increments are hard fought, but when somebody does it, everybody does it. Shows that the training environment, the training techniques. I mean, you said you play esports. There's meta changes, right? Somebody who is kind of mediocre in like a newer meta who just grew up playing when people knew certain
Mhm.
tricks, just know how to play the game in a
You
certain
know what?
way,
I'm kind of
could
glad you brought this point up,
could
because
be
now
could be
that I'm
pretty good
thinking
against
about
like
it,
a previous champion from
mm,
I mean, I like some games that are decades. I like Warcraft 3. Watching that, it's decades
yeah.
old, but there's people
So
still uncovering new strategies. Yeah.
right. So here's what I never witnessed in my time in the FGC, right? I've never witnessed a guy who was like, well, fuck. Yeah, no, I don't think I really I never okay, so I never witnessed a guy who like took a game seriously, was trash, and then moved on to another game that he took seriously, and then was like all
Mm,
of a sudden a god, like I've never seen that, because in fighting games there's a general strategy that you could apply to all fighting games, and if you could
hmm
break it down, it's about controlling the space on the screen.
Sure. Which is the
So
same as sparring and sparring in
yeah,
meat space.
you're
Yeah.
controlling the
It's about
space in the
distance,
3D environment,
timing, reading your opponent's
right?
moves.
How much
Maybe
freedom
those
to
timings are
move,
different between Tekken or Street Fighter or Soul Calibur or
right?
whatever.
So
Smash.
if you kind of don't have that, it's one of those things. It's
Hmm
like you can train at it and get better. I do see your point with that. There's, I think it's 50-50. It's 50% of it is you
hmm
as the competitor, what your abilities are, how much drive you have, what you're willing to put into it. And then it's your competition or your trainer, or the
hmm
mix of all those things. So
Yeah.
it's the same as like, you know IQ, right? Like they say it's your environment plus your
hmm
genetics. It's pretty much 50-50 that, and it's like the same thing there.
hmm
um so but basically, with the example you've laid out, there is no way we could tell, in your opinion, there is no way we could tell who is truly like represented skill wise in today's sports because they just societally didn't have the same training and upbringing as the boys. So it's like
Yeah,
if we put
so the best example of this is actually in esports when it comes to gender lines, right? Because video games have always been marketed as, and computers have been marketed as boy toys. So just
this was
the
another thing I wanted to come back to. Yeah,
yeah,
go
so
ahead.
just the massive, right? It's a much bigger disparity. I think it's just got to be a much bigger disparity than even in sports in terms of encouragement simply to participate, right? So if you have a kid and you say, "Oh wow, you're so good at that video game. Here's this, I bought you this video game, whatever." They're gonna like it and they're gonna play it, and if they're not immediately terrible at it, there's a good chance they'll keep going with it. But if they're literally never, they're told that it's not for them, they're not given access to it, they don't have a chance to play, they don't get to play until they're much older, and then you know I can't imagine trying to play. I'm sure you've had friends who have tried to pick up a first person shooter as like a 20-year-old for the first time, right? They don't have those thousands of hours as a kid, running
Oh
around
yeah, I
looking
had a
up at the
friend who
ceiling.
yeah, exactly. No, I totally had that experience one time. I had a friend, he only knew how to play arcade games because that's where
Hmm.
we met him. And as soon as we tried to play like Quake on the
Hmm.
Dreamcast, he was
He's like stuck in a
like
corner, right?
spinning, looking at the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so you brought this up last night, and I just wanted to. I felt like it didn't ask.
Mm.
It was an explanation that didn't answer my question.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
yeah,
Let me know.
why are the why are the trans women winning?
I mean, most most trans
Because you
women
said it's
who are,
marketed towards boys.
hmm,
Uh-huh.
yeah, most. So there's actually, I mean, there's actually at least two things. So um, most trans women who are, in their, let's say, like mid 20s or 30s, or someone like, how old, actually, I'm just curious, how old is Scarlett? um, she's got to be, yeah, she's 30, right?
There's a
The
couple in the FGC that are
StarCraft
like
player.
under 25.
um, but
Mm.
you know somebody who isn't growing up trans in the last like 5 maybe 10 years, their access um, to to hormones, to social transition, just it's most people who have grown up trans, in the 90s, in the 2000s, they probably took some time to get there, and so they probably had an adolescence where they grew up pretty much as boys in a number of ways. So they were marketed boy toys.
What
The
about
other
a
the other aspect
20-year-old
is
in the year
that,
2024?
sorry.
What about like a 20-year-old in the year 2024?
um,
I
20
mean,
year old,
because
it might be changing to some extent, but it super depends, where you're growing up trans in like Indiana or Ohio, or it's not like, it's not a super
that's another
super progressive
point I
kind of,
wanted to
right.
bring up with you. Why does it seem more like an ideology than a sexual identity?
Mm. um I don't know, you tell me. Right, well, why does it what
Yeah,
why does it seem like
it's
an
very
ideology? Yeah.
it's a very it's very partisan, isn't it?
Oh, why does like acceptance of trans
And
people as a thing, as just a part of
no,
life?
not just
Why
the
is
acceptance. I
that?
mean,
Well,
why are most of the trans people themselves uh on the left?
I mean, it's kind of like asking why are, black people or Jewish people on the left, right?
But hold
Um,
on, but not all the black people are on the left, not all the gay people are on the left. So, but why are most of the trans people on the left?
Why wouldn't they be? I mean, the people on the right
Because if it's a
kind of
naturally
kind
occurring
of hate
thing,
them, right?
if it's a naturally occurring thing, well, sure, but they're not very friendly with gay people or
I
minority.
mean,
Well, that's the
gay
character. I
people are
don't
kind
believe
of on the
that.
left
That's the
right. I don't know. Let's look at like
nah. There, you
um,
could find a fair bit of famous gay people who are not on the left.
well, sure, you could definitely find examples, right? But those are examples that prove
A
the rule,
lot more
right?
than trans people. You could find a lot more
Sure.
gay people
I
on the
mean,
right than trans people on the right.
um, the level of I mean, the degree to which trans people are a minority compared to gay people um, makes them more at risk of violence, um, and it's
You
harder to
really believe
find
that?
community. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
wait, that's like
hold on,
that's just
wait. You
generally
have to
true.
define
That's not
violence
even
for
just
me.
like
Could we define
if you're a
violence really
minority
quick so I
of any
understand?
type in any country, right? So um, if I go to a right, so if I'm any kind of minority anywhere, and I just grow up in an area where there aren't people like me in some way, then I don't have those kind of automatic buddies who will stand up for me if somebody tries to beat me up or whatever, right? That's just like a truism, kind of the world over, right? That's not even a like a trans specific thing.
So
So
if your
so just to
environment can
yeah.
influence whether or not you become trans, then doesn't that prove isn't that the conservative argument? Doesn't that prove them correct?
Well, so I think that the best possible, most perfect analogy for this happens to exist, which is the existence of left-handed people. I'm not sure if you've heard this, like description as an analogy, but um, it's a pretty incredible one, which is that. Let me see if I can pull this up. Um,
I did for a while. I worked with Steven Spielberg's father. He lived to
yeah.
be like 103 years old, and he was a left-handed person who
Mm.
was forced to write with his right hand in school.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
Yeah,
what I was going to go to. So this
yeah.
I should show this to the chat as well, but whatever, you guys can Google
I
it.
knew that was a thing.
Um, right. So the history of left-handedness, going from whatever around 5% to 12%. It's like, where did it come from? Where did all these left-handed people come from? Is it some kind of ideology? Are they invading? Is it something in the water? Is it something the Democrats are doing? Right. This is just people who, exactly as you said, um, people who were left-handed were forced to be right-handed, and when the stigma of left-handedness being of the devil or whatever whatever the hell that came from.
Is that what it was? I have no idea
Well,
if there was a
left-handed
stigma
is
behind it.
like sinister is Latin for left-handed. I know there is like an association biblically
That's
there.
interesting.
I'm not sure
I'll have to look
exactly
into that.
where that came from, but
Because I mean,
um,
I think left-handed people have existed since the beginning of time, so I'm not it'd be interesting to see what the reason behind that was. Maybe it was just
so
kind of
why
like
are we
a
seeing
proper
suddenly
way of
all these left-handed people? Now that we're saying it's not so bad to be left-handed, why are we seeing an explosion of them?
were left-handed people as stigmatized as trans people? Like, were they looking to try to keep left-handed people out of sports and stuff like that?
Is that are two
Because
things
that's the
being
only
equal
that's
necessary to examine this argument?
well, the thing is, for me, I'm just kind of I'm just kind of hyper focused on the sport, the women's sports part,
Sure.
because I other
Well
than
then well
that,
then
I
let's
don't
pull
really
this
care
up.
about.
I think we should follow down this line of questioning because I think this is very fruitful. You were asking why are we it seems like it's environmental. So let's say you had one state where people are kind of chill with left-handed people and they're like, oh, you use your left hand, right with your left hand then. And then there's some other state in the country where it's like, no, that's of the devil. Catholic school. I didn't go to Catholic school, but I heard they would smack you
Yeah.
with a yardstick or ruler or whatever, in your hand.
Yeah.
They're like, no, right with your right hand. It's like, why are there more left-handed people in progressive states than in conservative states, right?
Hmm.
Does that does it do you see how those things connect?
It just seems, well, it seems like trends are kind of created the same way. So I don't know if I can really.
Well, does it make sense just for left-handed people? Does that just can you
Oh, for
explain can
left-handed
you
people,
explain
I
that
mean,
correlation
in that
in an instance?
example, it went in your left-handed example, it just seems it's hard for me to parse because it seems very irrational, right? Like there's no reasoning, there's no like founded reasoning for not liking left-handed people.
But it's
Like
but
there's
it's a fact that happened, right? For whatever
sure,
reason, maybe it was someone is putting a biblical synergism comes from the Latin word meaning on the left side. In English, dating from the 14th century, pertained to some measure of evil, foreboding, malevolence. Others retain the Latin meaning of left.
uh,
So,
that's that seems interesting. I don't know if that
but it
directly relates to.
doesn't really matter
Yeah,
why people were, discriminate. You have an example of somebody who went through that, right?
who went through it.
Who went through. Sorry, did you say
Yeah,
they were
right, right,
they were
right.
forced to write with their right hand, even though they were left-handed,
Yeah, it
something like
wasn't out
that?
of anything malicious. It
Hmm.
was more
It
like
was just the
that's
right way
just
to
how
do
we
it.
do things.
Yeah,
Right. It's just
right.
the right way to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
and I'm sure
so
most of the
that's why
time it
I'd
wasn't like,
say,
oh, you're evil. It was just, no, the proper way is to write with your left hand. I'm going to teach you the proper way, something like that, right?
hmm, right. Um, I just think that it's different because I don't
Wait, wait,
think
wait,
we'll
wait.
look
I
back
don't want to
on,
hear about why it's
huh?
different. Just tell me for left-handed people if you can come up with some explanation of why there's more left-handed people in the area, or in this case, in the period of time in
Well, I don't
which
know
it's
that.
accepted to
I
be left-handed.
maybe because now there's no rule saying you only have to write with your right hand. Um, so maybe there was always left-handed people there. They were just writing with their right hand and just they still had terrible writing.
Hmm.
Just, like the guy I knew, he says I have terrible writing with my he says I can write with both hands and with both hands I write terribly. So
I'm
he's like,
right-handed. And I also just have terrible handwriting. That's, I think, more of a
yeah,
dyslexic
yeah.
thing. But um, right, but
So yeah,
okay, so that explanation makes perfect sense for that example. So not
but
getting
once
into
they
so not getting into saying whether something is equally stigmatized or at the same rates or anything. Just like setting it up broadly. It does appear to be the case that being trans was less known and more stigmatized, let's say 20 years ago, until now. Well, it's there's more acceptance and more stigmatization. It's not purely more acceptance because there's a lot of legislative bills to try to prevent the
mhm.
existence of trans people, and there's people saying that transgenderism should be eradicated from public life. There's people who want to make it illegal to be trans in public.
Now,
Um,
like I don't agree with eradicated from public life.
mm,
I mean, I'm not sure what that entails, but I don't it doesn't
mhm.
sound like something I would agree
It's
with.
it sounds pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, but I simply I feel like every adult can make responsible choices and live their life the way they want to, as long as they're not a detriment to society or whatever, whatever. But in this kind of specific case, I just feel like um, today, the reason why we have women's sports is because we have these guardrails up that will protect women from having to compete against biological men. And it's one of those things where I think if we fast forwarded 100 years to the future to look back to now, we would say, you know, that was kind of silly, and I'm not sure how we got there. Hopefully, that I mean that's my intuition at least. I don't think the gap between men and women are going to close um, that fast like anytime soon.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean
And I believe
it's definitely a
for women to be
question if that.
competitive,
It's definitely a question of if that, if that will happen, if that could happen, if that will happen at a particular rate. Those are all to be seen within history, right?
mm,
But just to go back to, so we're talking about this thing with left hand, we're talking about this thing with trans people. You're curious, why are they here? Why does this seem like this arrives on political lines or in different places? Is it possible that trans people are like left-handed people, that they've always been there, they've been kept out of sight, and now that they're not being kept out of sight so much, for instance, some of the laws on the books not allowing them to be in public are now gone, that now we just see more of them because they're just not being kept
um,
out of public, like
so
people
I
with
have
disabilities.
your description just leaves me with more questions. So you
Hmm.
say that maybe what if they've always been there, right? So
Well,
meaning
I'm asking if
before,
it's possible, like left-handed people that were kept out of sight and now are allowed to just be left-handed.
right.
You said
So you
left-handed
mean
people
that they
probably have always been with us.
you're but by your account, you're saying that they've existed before the medical technology was created to medically like transition somebody, before puberty blockers and hormones and
Hmm.
things like that were created. You're saying that they've been around since before all that
Hmm.
innovation.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, you don't need to transition medically or hormonally to be a trans person.
That's accurate.
Okay, so if that's true, what are the guardrails? What would be the guardrails set in place if, let's say, we have a women's league, but trans women can join? What would stop me from just saying I'm a woman and going to the women's like boxing league or
Hmm.
something and just whatever? I don't care. Give me my shoe endorsement. Give me my publicity. I'm in it. I'm here for the money.
What would
What
stop you?
guardrails
Well,
are in
you would
place?
you would
Yeah,
have to take hormones that would reduce your testosterone, and
but
you'd probably want to take hormones that increase your estrogen. Otherwise, you'd be really fucked. So you would have to
so
do
those are
hormone
rules
replacement
in place
therapy
now.
for a couple of years. Yeah. So Leah Thomas went through that. In general, you know, I can't tell you specifically for every single league, but I believe like pretty much everywhere it's something like that, a year, a couple of years, yeah, of
Okay, so what
medical
if I just
transition.
didn't care about? What if I didn't care about going through that?
If you
Going through
if you
that,
didn't care about losing muscle mass and growing breasts, and then
right?
then sure, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. What
I
if
don't
I
I
just
don't
cared more
I
about
don't know
the?
if I don't know if it's required to kind of like socially transition and live as a woman. I'm not sure if that goes into those
I don't
determinations.
think so.
Um,
That would seem like discrimination if
hmm.
you know.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't rule those kind of rules out because they seem like discrimination. But
How would they
um,
prove that?
yeah. Um,
You want to look
I
at my
mean, I mean,
Facebook
I mean, let's
account
say,
or
let's say that were the case. Would you be willing to live as a woman all of the time for 2 years in order to
I'm just
get
saying,
ahead in a
let's just say
sports
I didn't
league?
give a fuck, right? Let's just say my only
Well,
goal
sure. So that's
out
so that's what I'm asking. If
uh
your only goal was just to get ahead, would you be willing to medically and socially transition and live as a woman all of the time for 2 years, and then however many years that you're competing? Is that
yeah,
something you'd
this
be
is
willing
an
to do?
analogy. In this analogy, I'm a crazy person. So I'm just like
Well, it sounds
I'm
like you're
just
a very
hyper
focused
driven.
person, right?
Yeah, I'm very hyper focused
Mm-hmm.
on one goal, whether it be destroying women's sports, whether it be just financially. Let's say I got nothing to lose, right? I'm at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom of the barrel. I'm desperate, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck it, I'll go through transition therapy for 2 years
Yeah.
just to
I mean,
be famous. I'll get a shoe deal. Who cares? Like,
how many people out there do you think would have this mindset? And also, how many people out there can you say that have transitioned and are now suddenly destroying it? Because we talked about Leah Thomas, how she's the go-to example for swimming of a trans
not
person
for
who
me, but
transitioned and
yeah.
then was destroying her cis competitors. And then we talked about how that is exactly the opposite, right?
Personally, for me, I go to the Fallon Fox example.
Yeah,
The
I
MMA
think I think I
fighter,
think when we get into
the woman,
MMA, I think that's
yeah, the
probably
weightlifting champion, the Canadian weightlifting
mhm.
champion who
I think
broke
when it
all
comes
the.
to literally um, like strength
Why would we limit
lifting
ourselves to?
and and fighting, I think those are two places where it seems like they're probably would need to be those kind of
Why?
requirements or further requirements. Um, but
Why?
because from the few anecdotes that I've seen, it does seem like those could end up pretty mismatched. Um,
Why would it only be mismatched in those areas but not others?
well, there are like physical, developmental, and on average differences between men and women, right? So men have more strength in their arms, women have more strength in their hips. Um,
Yet men's, yet uh, women have more strength in their hips. You mean more
right.
than a man?
Um, on average, at least where that strength. I mean, men are smaller on average than women, right? So there's that. If we're looking just at averages,
Men have
um,
smaller, yeah, in ratio to their shoulder width, they have smaller waist than hips. Yeah,
so they have a higher
that's
proportion of their
because,
lean mass in their lower limbs than males
right.
do, right? So they have
Hmm.
relatively stronger lower limbs than males. Males have relatively stronger upper limbs than females. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just these obvious biological advantages are just never going to go away. They're only going to become more clear as the science gets better. Um,
Well, okay, so
Especially when it comes to neuroscience. I'm seeing that it's
hmm,
kind of like a mystery now, but I think if someone actually looked into it and did a study on it, it would be interesting. I already know what they're going to find, but it would be interesting what exactly they find is the difference. Could it be that men and women have different brains? I think there's already some research to
there,
verify that.
there's already research looking at that.
Right. So if we
Um,
if we had a trans person who passed away, and let's say they donated their body to science, and we cut them open to look at, and they had a female brain in their
mhm.
male body. I mean, that would be something that,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know, like,
there's a there's a video talking about the what is it, the neurophysiology, um, neurobiology of transsexuality. So I can't endorse this as like this isn't my field, so I can't talk about the science of this. This is like accurate or inaccurate. But there's a
mm,
professor giving a lecture who says basically that I think it was like
mm,
fMRI or MRI, not like
mm.
not dissection, because I don't know what you would even see in dissection. I think you'd want to look at like active brain
Well,
scans.
the brain is still like, we know very little about the brain still
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yeah.
Um, but like,
But I
it
mean,
would be interesting to do
would
a
that
study
change
on
something
like
for you?
why.
If you found out, factually, scientifically speaking, that the brains of trans women are more like the brains of cis women than the brains of cis men, would that
And
change
that would
something
be
for you?
interesting. It would change, like, it would change the opinion, maybe, that I think it's a mental disorder, right? But I
It
don't
would
think it would.
change it from what to what about it being a mental. I wasn't clear what your
No,
before and
it would,
after.
for me, it would make more like sense that they were more, maybe, normal according to what their brain
Mm-hmm.
makeup was, as versus just an abnormality in their mind somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I currently think. And it's also been discovered that a lot of trans people are actually on the autism spectrum.
That could be true.
Yeah, it's a recent study that they did, and they
Mm.
found that uh, a large, sample size of the study found that a lot of the trans people had, were on the autism spectrum. Um,
Sure.
well, there was
What is
something I
that?
wanted to tell you and just
What is
kind
what does
of
that have to do
just
with anything? I guess I'm not sure what that
well,
relates
to
to. I
me,
guess yeah.
I just I just think it has more to do with an abnormality within the mind than it has to do with just like a natural biological makeup that just led them to see themselves as the different gender.
Is that where does that feeling come from? I guess
Where does
is
the feeling? Well, so it used to be called gender dysphoria. So we're at any point in time, most of us, I would say all of us, are uncomfortable in our own body. I know I am sometimes.
mm.
Everybody has that sensation, but there are people that have a dysphoria that they're in the wrong body. Like there
Well,
is
so
a
there's so
a
there's so there's two
stress.
different things. So there's body dysmorphia or body dysphoria, and there's gender dysphoria. So
Oh,
there's those are two separate
uh,
things, right? So
so I should have said this earlier.
mhm.
I don't believe in gender. I'm like a
Oh,
gender
cool. Oh,
abolitionist.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
I think if we could work from there, that would make it easier for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, wait, you're a
I
you're a
don't believe in
gender
gender.
abolitionist. You think that we should stop categorizing people based on gender?
No,
Um,
there are no genders in my opinion.
sorry. Okay. Um, you think that we should stop having like gendered clothing, for example?
No, we don't have gendered clothing in my opinion.
Hmm. I think we do. If you go on most sections,
No, we
most
have cultural clothing, but
cultural
where they're
clothing,
not, they're not actually gendered. They're
they
more
won't
like
have like a
a
men's
social.
section and a women's section.
Sure, but a men's section in a women's section in Afghanistan is going to look a lot different than a
Mm-hmm.
women's section like in America. You know what I mean? So
Of
most of
course, yeah.
these are social constructs that are
Mm-hmm.
that we assign because male and female is all are the two sexes. Those are the influence for what we wear. It comes from what sex
Well,
we are.
it's not
And
the
then
it's not the
they
only influence as you just pointed out, right?
Sure, it's that plus culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what would you call if you had to pick a word to describe the intersection of sex, sex identity, and cultural identity? What word would you choose to describe that?
What do you mean? Like I would just say like that's an American man and that's an American woman.
But you said that you don't believe in man and woman. You don't believe in gender.
No, I believe in the sexes. There's male and female. So I
Sure.
know like a male is a man and a female is a woman.
Um, but a man wears something different or women especially, right? Say wears something different in America versus Afghanistan. But they're both females. How is that possible?
Yeah, sure. That's culture shapes what they wear.
Okay. So culture intersects with sex identity. So for me, I just call that gender. That seems like a good word to describe that intersection, right?
You could use that. I don't
I
have
mean,
to.
I use words as models. I have like a linguistic
Right.
kind of underpinning of the word. I like some words because they sound nice, but in general, I like
Yeah.
using words in a way that's like effective. It's kind of a
Right. Well,
utilitarian
I've never
approach to language, right?
in well, in my whole life, I've never used gender.
You've never
I've
used the
always
word gender or never used gender as a concept?
I never used gender as a concept my whole life.
You never used
Up
gender as a
until recent,
concept.
I've only recently kind of learned about it,
Hmm.
and it's worked out perfectly for me. No one's ever been confused by me when I
Um,
talk about men and women.
well, wait, men and women are that's gender. That's not sex. That's gender.
To me it is sex. Man is a male, and a female is a woman.
Hmm.
Those just are linguistic differences, in my opinion.
Sure. Um, so culture changes over time in the way that it intersects with sex, right? So what a man wears in Europe in the 12th century or the 16th century or the 20th century or the 21st century is different,
Right.
right?
Right.
The sex isn't massively changing. Maybe there's some, some evolutionary pressures that are occurring, right? But it's not massively
Hmm.
changing. But the clothes are changing dramatically. The
Right.
social
Right.
roles are changing,
Hmm.
and the interactions between males and females at different periods of
Pretty
time in the
much
same.
mostly remain the same. I
Most of them remain
mean,
the same. You don't think
I think
our.
so.
I mean, just looking at America, if
Well,
you were
America's
female in
pretty
American
unique.
culture, at the founding of the nation, you couldn't own land, um,
Okay.
right? And for a lot of our history, until pretty recently, you haven't been able to vote. You couldn't get a credit card. Um, there's like you couldn't go to school. You couldn't do a lot of things. So I would
Okay.
say those are pretty dramatic shifts.
Oh, sure, but I mean, the as related to the sexes, not really. I mean, men still married women, and had families and stuff like that, and then sometimes there were gay people, and they didn't change their sex or their gender or anything like that. I don't know. Yeah, sure, they had different roles. They're not equal. The sexes
Hmm.
are not equal. They're different.
Or
There
or
was a
or
reason
they
why
may or may
it
not
was
be
like
equal,
that.
but they're not the same. They're not identical. Is it- I would agree with that. I mean, male and female humans are not identical. Equal is
Well, they're
like
not
is more
equal.
like a value judgment, right? Or not equal.
No, I
That's
wouldn't. Not really.
or it's
Why would it?
it it requires more context. Equal in what way, right? It's just too
Do you
vague.
feel like if I say like men and women are not equal, do you feel like that takes
Well, wait,
away
men and women.
the
When did we get
value
into
of a?
gender?
No, no, no. That remember, I don't use gender.
You just said man and
That doesn't.
woman. Those are gendered.
Right. I know, but to me that just means that the genders don't exist. I just use man to mean male and woman to mean female.
Why?
It just colloquially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
It just sounds less weird.
this sounds less weird.
That's
Huh.
all.
Okay.
I could say female. It's actually not a big deal if you would prefer me to
Well,
use
it's just
female.
I just don't know what you're saying because when I say man and woman, those are gendered statements, like linguistically speaking, and
Do you
conceptually those mean something gendered versus male and female. Those are
so
biological.
when
Those are
you hear
different.
me right, but when you hear me speak, is just for the sake of this
Hmm.
conversation, when you hear me speaking and when I say woman, when I just say woman, do you get a different picture do you get like a trans woman, or do you see like a woman and like a cis woman in your head when I use the word? Are you like genuinely confused and not really knowing what I'm talking about when I say woman, or
No, I'm being
or
pedantic because I
yeah.
because I'm
Oh,
pointing out that you're using the concepts of gender all the time and in the same way as everybody else, but you're just not. You're just not. When you're talking to
I
me,
don't
you're saying
subscribe
that
to
you
the
don't make a
idea that
distinction, right?
right.
But like a male human doesn't wear a trench coat, right? A man wears a trench coat. A woman could wear a trench coat too, right? I'm not trying to be exclusive, right? But
A
just
male human could wear or whatever could
well,
wear a
right.
trench
But
coat.
a male human, doesn't have a job. A baby is a male
Well,
human, but they don't have a job, right?
okay, well, it's just a choice for how I speak colloquially. It's not, I've never confused anyone.
Sure,
Like,
and that's fine because I mean, um,
it still serves the same purpose for me when I
mhm.
use the word man and woman.
I mean,
It's,
for a lot of, let's say, just American history. We don't have to go to I don't know, world history or all time or whatever. But for a lot of American history, let's say, um, the difference between sex and gender, in some ways, um, like a certain ideological framework has. Let me think of how to say this. Um, Women have been viewed as females in the sense of what you are for is to breed children. This is a particular ideological framework. This isn't an accurate or specific scientific framework or whatever. This is simply an ideological framework. Women are for doing chores around the house and for raising kids and for birthing kids, right? And men are for wars
uh,
and for labor and all these other kind of things, right? I'm being super super simplistic, okay? Um, but the association between your kind of like biological destiny and your sex is something that for a lot of American history have been so tied together. And the ideological framework that I'm talking about that tied those things together is the same one that said, um, why would women need to vote? They can't use their minds that way and they don't need to. Why would they need to go to school? They can't and they don't need to use their minds that way. Why would they need to own property? It's going
what
to be
about the
something
people that
crazy.
said, I don't know if women should vote because they're not eligible for the draft?
Um, I mean that's fair. Yeah.
No. Okay. Well, I mean, I just what is what's your point
Right.
exactly
So
with
my so my point is that for a lot of American history, you know, you could kind of use those interchangeably because your destiny as a woman was based on how people saw your destiny as a female. And one of the consequences of moving into a period of time where we see women as autonomous, mindful beings that can choose their own destiny and live their own life more the way they want to and have the same freedoms and rights as a man. Um, hey, welcome, time delay, bend away. Um, One of the consequences of that is that we've started to recognize that the way that we've gendered people has been so associated to sex, um, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think when you say that you don't use gender, I think I think it's useful to use gender in the way that I'm using it because it's describing something that, well, the intersection of culture and sex. If that's what gender is, that's saving some time saying the intersection of sexual identity and cultural identity, saying that every time. You could just say gender, right?
I could, I mean, why? I could just say that's a man from this country, that's a woman from this country, and what more really needs to be said other than
Well, if
that?
we're if we're talking
I've
about
not
if
run
we're talking
into
about
this.
trans topics, especially, then that's where it gets like
Oh,
particularly
sure.
right.
Well, yeah. Well, if we're talking about trans topics, I mean, I could still say that I just don't believe in gender, and then the kind of the burden would kind of have to be on you on to convince me why I should.
Well, I've said why I use it, that I think it's practical. I'm curious to hear. So time delay, bend away. Yeah, please feel free to jump in. Um, I won't be able to stay too much longer just because it's getting late. But I'd love for you to introduce yourself. I don't think you shouldn't need any special permissions to unmute and to make your voice heard.
Well, hey.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it's just been a very interesting conversation. So the whole debate originally started with trans women competing in sports, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And the existence of
yep.
trans people generally, what even is that, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think as a woman, and again, this is my personal input, it's kind of tough dealing with like the trans male to female population into sports, but it's okay. I think that, but it's kind of like a side mark. It's like 0.1% of the problem. Honestly, the biggest problem is straight cis males to female population. And we're spending so much time talking about, trans women, it's gotten so much of a laser focus lately in the news. And I think we've kind of forgotten that, honestly, the biggest threat to any woman, trans, bisexual, lesbian, straight, is a straight male.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why I'm concerned, because there are no guardrails stopping straight men from entering a lot of these different sports. There was this guy, I don't know if you heard of this guy named Zuby, but when he heard the rules to compete in like the women's weightlifting division, he just went over there, said, "I'm a woman," didn't change anything about his look, his appearance, or anything like that, and he just got the belt for the women's weightlifting. So he currently still brags about being the women's weightlifting champ.
And that's fine. Like, I mean, it's hard,
That's
I'm
fine.
sure, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm a professional weightlifter or anything. And it must be very hard for the competitors that are, and again, I'm looking into the science. I'm a biologist and a chemist. And
Okay.
it's very, so there's two different arguments basically that I have. One is that this trans argument is very hot and very new, and especially with the chemical treatment that is available, it's kind of been a short-term amount of data that has been researched for the last few years as to how much that affects muscle. Anyway, so that's one argument, compartmentalized. But it kind of irritates me, and this is totally off topic, and I know you guys haven't really been debating this, but everyone's so upset about trans male to female competing in sports and everything, and how horrible that is for women. But in a totally different, unrelated portion of this country, especially, is like, Roe versus Wade being overturned, like straight, like there's a lot of like bigger topics that women are very upset about, and no one is talking about them. And I get that, again, I understand this is totally going off base, but it makes me feel like this is kind of like a nitpick within the straight community, especially straight male community, that, oh my God, women are getting robbed. And especially because no one cared about women's sports before this. There's like no financial burden because men are going into trans men are going to the female sports. Like, women are still getting underpaid. Women are still not getting watched on pay-per-view. Like, no one cares about female sports. And the only reason that...
So can I ask you something?
Yeah.
that's your case you're making, is it okay to just do away with women's sports then? Should we just like let's just rip the Band-Aid off and just get rid of it today?
I mean, I think that'd be a better question of not from you or me. I think that'd be a better question of women that are actually in sports. I think that would be more of a question of towards women that are hosting these things, and it looks like, and this is just what I'm watching in the news because I've gotten also hooked into this. I'm guilty of it as well. That women that are running these, and WNBA and everything are allowing this to happen, and they're the professionals. So are they just allowing that to happen? I mean, what in the end of the day, yes. So what are you going to do? Yep. So
well, you can stand up to the bullies who are putting the social pressure on people to accept this. I think it's here. One thing that we're kind of missing here, kind of the elephant in the room, is it should be okay to not like something and to just say no to some people.
No,
you should
for
just
sure.
be able to say no, and some people should just be okay with being said no to. I think like protecting trans people from being told no is not protection at all. I don't think it's good for society. It's not good for them either.
Well,
no, but the people that are saying no are the professional women that are in charge of the sport. So, I mean, if I understand how you're upset about it, but like these are the people that are making the decisions, are the people that are getting, I would think, hurt the most.
They don't think long term about it. They're only thinking short term.
So you're telling them, as professional women who have been in this industry, what they are getting hurt by?
I know what they would get hurt by because I am a man and I know what my strength differential, my speed differential, all those things.
No. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that at all. I'm not saying that you might be correct. And again, I'm sorry, by the host.
I have a daughter.
No, please.
No. I'm not trying to dissuade your input at all. I'm trying to say that, and I'm sorry if I'm overruling by the host.
No, not at all.
You're a great host.
No, you're doing fine.
But these women that are, and it's, I think if I looked correctly at the stats, the women that are making these decisions in the professional women industry in sports, it's mostly women. I don't think the money's coming from them, but I think it's mostly women. And to my understanding, they're okay with it.
I think your view on this might be a little shallow then. I think you would have to look a little deeper, and you would find plenty of unsatisfied women who are very upset with what's been going on.
Agreed. Agreed, totally. I'm talking about the people that are making the decisions, like the head of the the head of the boards and everything. Do you have
and it sucks that so many women have to suffer. It just sucks that so many women have to suffer because of the decisions of a few.
Do you think your daughters would suffer from this decision?
Sure. I mean, if they made it to the pro level, I would think it would be extremely unfair, of course.
So
You're essentially putting them up against people who have if they've had the advantage of going through a male puberty before transitioning, it doesn't matter how much bone density they lose or muscle mass that they lose, they're still going to be way more advantaged physically than their cis female counterparts. Of course, it's a huge concern of mine.
Agreed. What sports? I'm trying not to get too personal, but what sports do your daughters play?
Oh, she's only 5 years old. I'm just saying in the future, if let's say she wanted to participate in, or she got good enough to participate in professional sports or collegiate sports, like some women are being denied their shot at scholarships because they had to compete against a biological man, and that's who they lost their scholarship to. And it sucks. That sucks. A young woman's life is derailed because of the decision of a few people that we have to bend over backwards to appease less than 1% of humanity, pretty much. It just doesn't seem to make perfect sense.
No, and I would totally understand if that was the point where she got so good that she could compete in college sports. But I guarantee that your daughter is more likely to have some future derailed by a straight man screwing something up in her life. And I think that, I mean, and this is a totally legitimate fear that you have, that she may be so good one day that she gets beat out. And statistically, that can happen for sure. But I
And
think that,
has.
yes, and I agree, it is totally legitimate that can happen. But I just feel like this is like a wolf in sheep clothing argument. Like straight men are far more likely to damage your daughter than a trans man being better at sports than this one specific sport that your
Some
daughter's
things
playing.
we don't have power to change, and some things are unavoidable, but I want to avoid the avoidable. So if we can avoid this by just everyone unanimously saying we don't agree with this rule change, we want to keep women's sports for biological women only, then we can go back to we've had it before. Let's go back to that. That's all I'm
So,
saying.
I mean, but if you want to avoid your daughter being hurt by a man, you know what you do? You vote to keep men off the street all the time. Like, I mean, that would be the vote you do.
If we just
Men,
did
I'm
it,
just
it would be
saying
safe. Yeah.
there's
So let's
that's
just
every other
outlaw
aspect of
men.
life. I agree. I agree that and there are plenty of lessons that I have to teach my daughter as a
No,
dad to a
this isn't a
daughter.
lesson. Let's advocate
Mm-hmm.
for, men advocating
Just a
that
rule
all men
change.
should be off the street by 6 o'clock at
Sure.
night. You want to vote for that?
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if we want to save our daughters, the biggest statistic save would be
No, I
keeping
got a better
straight.
solution for her. Carry a gun.
I mean, for sure, and especially,
Yeah.
as what's the equal equivalent is, if you have a gun, do you take the bullets out or do you screw up the chamber? You take the bullets out, right?
No.
No, for gun safety. Do you remove the
Uh,
bullets from the gun or do you screw up the chamber?
it depends on what are you
You
going
would,
to do?
okay,
Are you going to the
you,
store? Are you
so you have a gun in your hand. Do you remove the bullets or do you
No,
jerk
you
up the
tuck it in.
chamber?
You just you keep the bullets in, you put the safety on, you're fine.
All right. Well, anyway, the point is you remove the bullets. So the counter argument is you just remove men off the street. Like if this is a safety thing for your daughter, that would be the counter argument.
No, the safest thing, that's not realistic. We can't live in a free society that way.
Well, wait. So, okay. So, I think this is the question then. How do we choose whose rights or privileges can be infringed and whose cannot? Right? Does that fundamentally what it comes down to? Are there any rights or privileges that you feel that that trans people should have? Right?
Who are you
Or
asking?
I mean, okay. So you're saying when it comes to sports, just say no.
Are you
Don't allow
asking
trans
me?
people. Yeah. I'm asking you.
Oh,
When it comes to
okay.
sports,
Yeah.
trans people just say no. Trans people aren't allowed to compete in their
I would
gender
say
accurate
you can
category.
allow right. I would say you could allow trans men to compete in men's sports all day. I would never give a care.
Why is
I would
that?
never because they would never be competitive.
So
Okay.
okay.
Wait. But you said that it didn't have to do with empirical competition rates. Because when we talked about Leah
In the
Thomas
moment,
and we said
right,
that,
but
okay,
I
she
know
isn't doing better, and it doesn't seem like, in general, trans people are doing better, except maybe when it comes to fighting, and I think there was like one other thing, like weightlifting.
that's when I told
And
you
the
this. I gave you
and
the
the
slippery
Zuby
slope.
guy didn't win a belt away from anybody. That was false. Um,
Wait, hold on.
yeah, if you look that up, you'll see that he just posted a video, but he He didn't enter any competition. He just had a higher lift than the person who did.
Oh,
but he didn't take
you
anything away
mean-
from anybody.
I would have to. I'll double check that later and get back
Mhm.
to you on that. But
Sure, but
we could.
why is it that it's okay to take trans people's rights away, especially when I mean, it seems like you're a little bit back and forth on this. That it's like,
I'm
is
not
it
taking
about
anyone's
empirical?
rights away.
Well,
Well, you're saying just say no.
It's
Don't
about
allow
women.
somebody to do something, right? Don't allow
I'm
somebody
saying-
to compete in their gender category.
I think the point is that he's trying to
My-
protect young girls like his
Mhm.
daughter from being taken away. They're basically, if they are good at a sport, he's worried about his daughter getting robbed from something that they could
It's
be.
twofold. It's twofold, really. I'm worried about one, maybe them winning when they shouldn't have even been in the competition to begin with. Because even if there's one trans, like first place winner, I think that's one too many already. And the other thing I'm concerned about is if she just gets pummeled by, a man basically.
Well, it
comes
won't-
and if they're
It
doing
won't
a
happen in
physical
golf.
sport,
It won't happen in golf, right?
sure. No, I'm just
Right.
that's what I'm saying. If they're doing like
So I
soccer,
said fighting.
something like that.
Yep, maybe soccer.
No, even
there's checks.
soccer. You kick each other in the leg.
mhm.
Whose shin is going to break? Not the guy with more bone density.
Sure. There
I mean,
could
I
be
guess-
definitely some contact sports. But if we're saying, okay, swimming is an example, you're in different lanes, you're not impacting each other, right?
Yeah, but that comes to my other. So I'm trying to avoid two things, right? I'm trying to avoid one, them like taking a win away from biological.
Why
women.
should women
The
get
other-
this? Let's back up to that. Why should women get this? If women aren't
Because-
competitive, why should they get something? Why should they get awards? Why should they get their own category to get awards in? Why should they have that?
Why should they have women's sports? Is that
Yeah.
what you're asking?
Explain it.
Why should they have? Well, because we have a society where we want women to have more liberties and freedom.
Yeah, but
More
no one
liberties and
cares
freedoms,
about
but you're
women's-
giving them special privileges. They can't compete
Well,
against
they
the
are
men.
special.
No one
women-
cares about
okay.
women's sports. No one cares. And now all of a
Well,
sudden
women
everyone
that
does.
play the sports. The women that play the sports do care about it.
It's so
I care about it,
hypocritical.
being the father of a daughter. I'm not a hypocrite.
How
I have a
how
daughter.
much money did you spend last year paying for women's tickets for women's sports?
That's not the point, though.
That is the point.
It's not.
That is exactly the point. How many
money-
pay-per-view plays did you play on WNBA?
Is money the reason why we endorse or
But that's
How
the
many
point of
how
your-
many
that's
women's
the
sports
whole
matches
point.
did you watch or something, right? I think
I just
what
don't
she's getting
see-
at is
I
it's
just
like
don't-
You were afraid of scholarships being robbed from your daughter. These are all funded by people
Mm-hmm.
paying for WNBA. These are all funded by that. So if you didn't pay for any of that, you never contributed to any of that.
No, well,
You
men's
never-
sports pay for that.
No.
Men's
Oh,
sports
here we go.
subsidize the women's sports. That's
So
true. You could
good.
look
Then
that
we
up.
need trans men to women to go into women's sports so people like you care. And now we're talking about it
Personally-
still. We're still talking about
Personally,
it.
I
So
think
thank
it
God
wouldn't
they
affect
came
me,
in.
probably more
right?
people watching,
But-
yeah.
Yeah, more people are talking about women's sports now. More people are watching women's sports, all because, and it's so sad. And I totally support trans men to women. I totally support trans women, but it's so sad that it's gotten to the point where we need people that are trans to talk about women's sports, and here we are right now doing it. You've never talked about women's sports before you had daughters. Admit it. You never spent money on it, and now we're all focusing in on it.
That's not true. I used to watch women's basketball before I was married. That is, no, not women's basketball, women's volleyball, because the girls were hot. That's
Great,
so I used to
perfect.
watch-
So yeah,
right.
so your daughters will be
I do
hot.
care about-
They'll get
I've always
money.
cared about
Your
women's
daughters
sports.
when
Thank
they
you very
when
much.
thank you. No, your daughters will be hot when they grow up. they'll get money until the trans men to women, trans women, get money more when, your brothers are talking about it, and we'll still feed into it. It'll be great. So basically, we're just all winning right now, I think.
Could I explain to you why it's important though? Because it all ties. It's kind of like
Please
what
tell
me
me.
and Socrates. Sure, it's me and Socrates are kind of glossing over it earlier, which is it seems like a very like being trans seems like a very partisan to
So
the
this is
left.
not about
So
women's sports.
Mm.
This is a totally
no, it
different
all ties
conversation.
in.
No,
It
this
all
is your
ties
hurt
in.
point because your
Mm.
daughters that you finally care about, women's sports because you never paid for it, but you
I
finally
just
care
make the
about it because
point
your
before
daughters.
you.
Yep. Okay. Can you let me talk? Thank you.
Well, I wasn't finished talking before you butted in. I was
Oh,
still
okay.
trying to make. Yeah, I was still trying to make
Please
my
go ahead
points
and tell
there.
me about how
So,
hot.
okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
No. I was saying that it seems like a very partisan issue on the left, right? So if this is an issue where the left loses popularity on, then it's kind of like a domino effect. All those other things you care about get thrown away because people didn't like the trans advocacy on the left. Do you see what I'm saying? So
I
your
don't see what
vote.
you're saying, but I would love to understand what you're saying.
I'll
Yeah, because
explain.
the left
I'll
doesn't
explain.
care about trans sports. We don't
Well,
care.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
The left most definitely cares about trans issues. I can guarantee you that. Um, Now, the thing is that when it comes to voting, you're going to get like a Democrat or a Republican, whatever, right? And there's all these issues. Some are multi-issue voters, some are single-issue voters. You were talking about abortion rights and whatnot, right? But those things all get lumped in come elections, and elections are going to influence the the laws and things that come afterward depending on who's in office. So if they lose socially on the trans issue, that could be a domino effect where it's like, well, now the trans issue has turned me into a single issue voter, and I can't possibly vote for the left now.
Are you a
You
single
see what
issue?
I'm saying?
Are you a single issue voter when it is trans issue
When it comes
something that
to
will override everything else in American politics? When it comes to
it
your
could be for
attention, your
me.
focus.
I I pay attention to a lot, so it wouldn't be the only issue for me. But if it was, I would definitely only vote on that issue.
So
If
this
that
That's
is
was the
incredible.
so
I
this is the
mean,
if
most
that was the
just my
only
honest
one I
reaction is
was
that that's
aware of.
incredible. That this is the most important thing to you.
so
No,
I'm
I didn't
gonna
say it was. I said, hold on, let me restate that. I said if this was the only political issue I was ever aware of as a normie, right? I wasn't involved in politics. I didn't care about politics at all. All I knew is that all of a sudden, biological men are competing against women, and now it really bothers me. Now suddenly I'm involved. That's what I was saying. I'm a multi-issue voter. We can go down the line.
Hmm.
I all of it, all of it.
so
I have stances on
here's
all
the
those
most
issues.
disappointing thing to me. Like, and I'm gonna I'll probably stop after this, but like as a I keep touting this, as a woman, a trans man to woman competing against me is the least of my problems and concerns. I have like
It,
abortion issues that I have to deal with in my state. I have like IFV is in debate right now. Like there are some hard hitting issues as a woman that I have to deal
right.
with.
Did you hear any of what I just said though?
No, I'm
What do you
just
think
saying
of that?
like that's fine. Like if this is the one thing
That's
that makes
fine.
you
No,
gung
but I mean,
ho,
Wait,
and if you
let
think
time
this
delay finish
is,
your statement.
and if
sure.
you think this is the thing that like this whole debate right now we're talking about is what your daughters are going to be concerned with, I don't. I guess maybe I don't know. I'm just
Potentially,
telling
it's
you.
nothing guaranteed. I'm just saying potentially it could be. At the same time, it's a
I'm
moral.
talking to you like
Uh,
statistically, like numbers wise. Like you
Hmm.
can look this up anywhere. I can show you statistics. they will most
It's not
likely
the
have
most
issues.
important issue to me. If I were to rank this issue on my list of issues, I have moral qualms with it, of course, but it's not, doesn't even make the top 3 for me.
As far as your
Just the,
daughters are concerned, what are your top issues?
I would say immigration, foreign policy,
Hmm.
um, the economy.
Okay. No, those are totally legit. Okay.
Mhm.
But and those are very good issues, especially as a big, as anyone. I think those are big issues. But
Sure,
specifically
I
to
think those are
women.
the
But
those
specifically
are
to
the most
women, what are the
concerning issues
biggest?
this election.
No, for sure. But specifically to women, what do you think are the biggest issues?
Um, I for sure I know there's like abortion is a big one. I'm not sure, that seems to be the only one that's like, even though I don't agree that abortion is specifically a woman's issue, because it takes 2 people to make a child, and I feel like the man is not involved in that conversation enough, whether it be their responsibility for getting women pregnant, or the rights that the man has in whether or not the woman gets it, like, because it's half his child, so I
Hmm.
believe it should also be half his decision whether or not the woman gets an abortion. I feel like men are unfairly left out of that issue.
Do you feel that
Okay.
there's an equal burden um, usually experienced by men and women when it comes to pregnancy or to raising children?
Do I think that the sexes are different? Definitely.
Well, I just asking you in plain language. Do you think that men and women, or males and females, or whatever, do you think that people who uh, people who carry that child to term within their own body versus the partner who does not experience an equal burden during pregnancy? And do you think after childbirth that those two partners generally experience an equal burden?
So for the first part, I would say definitely, only the woman gets pregnant. We all know that. And then on the second part, it's a case to case basis.
Is there some argument that a disproportionate burden should have a disproportionate level of choice about the situation?
No, because there's no choice in that burden.
There's no choice in that burden.
Yeah, the man doesn't have the choice to be like, I'll be the one to get pregnant. There's no
So
choice. Yeah.
legally, there is a difference because we, as, uh, okay. So there's a difference between man burden versus woman burden in being pregnant. America has established that financially you can be responsible for anything, correct?
That
Like
wow, hold on.
you can be sued financially. I mean legally. I'm not legally,
Hmm.
but you can financially be brought to court for anything, correct?
I wouldn't say anything, but
I mean, you
I
won't
mean,
win. I'm just
Hmm.
saying financially you can bring anyone to
It's
court.
a pretty expansive, yeah, court system for civil suits in America.
I mean, you can bring anyone to any. It's financially you can be held liable. Someone can try to hold you
Hmm.
liable.
okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. But you can't you can't physically hold someone to their health. You can't force someone to
Well, I don't agree with rape. I don't think that.
No, I mean you can't force anyone to hold a health. You can't force anyone to make a health decision.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Like legally, I
Well, yeah,
can't
that's
bring
what I
you
mean.
to
You
jail.
can't.
I can't bring you to court and force you to keep your broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Right, or
bring you to
I can't
court
force you
and
to get
break your
pregnant, right?
arm as a punishment. I can't
Uh-huh.
I can't like medically force you to do anything in
Mm-hmm.
court
To have a procedure, etc.,
or deny you a
or deny your
procedure,
procedure. Yeah.
but I can financially do so. Correct?
Someone in my chat says, outside of rape, should abortion be allowed for both parties being completely irresponsible? Where
Well, I
does
mean, can you
accountability
answer my
take
question
place?
Yeah.
though?
Let's
I
let's just
asked you a
let's just
question.
focus here.
I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. I got a bit of ADHD, so you gotta forgive me. Can you repeat the question again?
All right. Well, I gotta go. I really thank you guys for letting me talk. I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for
Sorry
coming
about
on.
that.
I
Goodbye,
appreciate it.
guys. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All
All
right,
right. Take care.
bye. Yeah.
I think we'll have this
Sorry.
this kind of
Sure.
conversation more. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So how do you? Okay. Uh, Kung Fu Joe. You know, what was your concept for this conversation? Were you interested in feedback as well for this, or did you just want to talk?
I was just
Um,
I was just yeah, just kind of talking, and like you seem reasonable, and that you use logic to come to your conclusions and things like that. So I was wondering, is there any is there like a glaring, I mean, I know you got to go, but I mean,
mhm.
is there any glaring like hole in my logic or something that you, I don't know, because I feel like
Mhm.
some people are occupying this position on the transports um, debate for simply ideological reason.
Mhm.
That's my belief, because the scientific reasons and the data and the live examples of men versus women and these different sports, the rankings, because like women and men have competed against each other. I don't know if you've ever heard, like earlier you brought up the example of training, like maybe the train has something to do with it, right? So what if it's like the women's Olympic soccer team? They've had the best training we can get them for an American women's league to compete against the rest of the world, and yet they've gotten blown out by a high school men's team of high school boys. Um, I just don't know. I just don't think I can agree with that. Like I could see how it would make sense, but at the same time, I just there's too much. I'm 40 years old, so I've had a bit of lived experience. It's kind of like a combination of statistical data, medical analysis, biological analysis, combined with live examples of men versus women in different competitions, combined with my own anecdotal, like personal experience, seems to say that there is a more than reasonable argument for keeping women's sports solely for cis women. What would
So would
you?
you like me
Yeah.
to respond to that, or would you prefer if I at
Yeah.
least
What
start
would?
with responding to? So you asked me a question at the beginning. Are there any glaring holes in my logic, or kind of how I'm analyzing this, something like that?
Well, I feel like that might be a flawed question to ask you right now,
Well, no,
because I don't think
I have
you.
some answers
Well,
for that
let me
that
give you
might be
my
helpful.
reason. My
Okay.
reason is because you could. I know you got to go soon, and you
Mm-hmm.
could give me a reason, and then we could be like, oh, well, we just haven't expanded on that yet, so that's why you think it's flawed. You know what I mean?
Um,
because my fear is that,
No.
for
I'm
for
not going to put forth an argument. I'm just going to respond directly to what you said and just give you
mm,
some honest feedback.
just now, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, um, you are pretty inconsistent about what you say the reasons are for why you believe something. And so when I end up pressing on one, you end up shifting your underlying reason for a position. And the other thing that's a it's more of like a hole in your procedure than your logic is that when a line of kind of questioning or argumentation or inquiry or whatever seems to go down a route that seems like it's contrary to again what you say your reasons are for believing in something. um, it's possible it's a coincidence, but it seems like you want to jump away to something else, and that makes me consider that maybe you um, are a little bit concerned about changing your positions and what that might mean for you, something like that. I mean, you say you're 40. 40's not dead, man. 40's
No,
not
I know it's not
not too
dead.
old
The,
to
the reason
to
I said
keep
I just said that
keep
as my I've had a little bit of life experience, and that's
yeah,
what,
yeah.
a
But
combination of all that. Yeah.
you're not too
Yeah.
old a dog to
So
learn new tricks. Um,
yeah.
or to be wrong about, I hope that I'll be learning things that I was wrong about when I'm 40. I'm not saying that to say that you're wrong about this, but I just mean in general. I hope that
Yeah.
because I will be wrong about things when I'm 40, and
You're
I
not
hope that
set
I'll
in
be
your
learning.
ways and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
sure. I'm always
Um,
open to learning. I remember my my college like poli sci teacher telling me, oh, he was telling the whole class, you guys are going to get more conservative the older you
mm,
get. And he was a lefty, right? And he was saying that
mm,
as a lefty, laughing at us. And we were all like boos and jeers, like, no, like we were all anti the Iraq war and stuff like
mm.
that. And fuck George Bush, and
Yeah, cool.
that was all edgy and cool at the time, right? Um, and I was like, nah, no way. And then it's kind of like as I got older, sure enough, I'm just kind of like pushed. I feel more like it wasn't as much as a choice. I kind of feel like pushed and shoved over to this side a little more. I don't
Mm,
know if it was just the shifting of the goalpost underneath me,
mm.
or what. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean the reason I just my view on the trans athlete thing, I feel like it's pretty straightforward and doesn't have a whole lot of holes in it. I mean, I'm sure maybe you could tell me, but it's it's pretty straightforward, right? I believe that because of the biological advantages that men typically have over women in when competing in sports, that there should be a protected space for cis women to compete only against other cis women. And I just feel like that should be something that we hold value in the society. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
So I'll make one just closing statement.
sure.
I think it won't be super argumentative, but maybe it will be. Maybe it'll be a good place to start next time we talk. Which is,
Yeah.
um, if if women deserve to have a space to be able to compete, to win awards, possibly even to um, to have something kind of given to them because they're underrepresented. They're underrepresented in terms of earning power, in terms of kind of political power, different
Well,
things.
let's
People
just give
say,
I'll give you another
um,
reason. How about the reason is they just want to see who the best woman is.
sure, right?
Yeah.
If you want to say, I think there should be another league for for another league for trans men and another league for trans women, so that both of them can be competitive and can win awards
Wh-
and can have
What's wrong with the
scholarships.
pro leagues for trans women?
Sorry.
What's wrong with just the trans women just trying out for the pro leagues.
Well, so someone like Leah Thomas, for example, who transitioned, she lost strength, she became slower due to transitioning, right? So she wouldn't be competitive competing in the men's category. She
But
was
could
she was
still
about the
compete,
same
dude.
competitive level in the women's category after transitioning as she was in the men's category.
Okay, so this is where
But
I'm
she
confused.
wouldn't
Is
be
it for the love
competitive
of the
in the men's
sport?
category.
So is that your argument then? Is that the only reason she should join the women's league is because she wouldn't be competitive in
Well,
the leagues?
I'm saying that if you're reasoning for women, or in this case, you're describing specifically cis women. If the reason for cis women to have a league is so that they can have a league in which they're competitive.
No, it's that's it. The league. It's a league to where they could find out who the best woman is.
Find out who the best woman is. Is
Who
that
who the best women are within the sports? Yeah.
just to
So you want to
find
see.
out?
Yeah, it's a great that we all want to find out. We want to find out who the best like of anything is, right? That's why we have Guinness World Record and stuff like that. We just want to know who
I
the
mean,
best is.
that's not why I compete. I don't compete to find out who the best person in
Sure, you
Taekwondo
do.
is. I compete because I want to match myself against other people, right? Yeah, someone says, in chat, if you're number two, no point. If you're not first, you're last.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
But
I don't
there's it's more than just
it
who's
seems
the
like a
best. It's
whole
like you're competing to do as best as you can, right? That's the
but it seems like a hole in your argument because it's like it seems like the only reason you'd advocate for trans women in women's sports is so that they could win more.
that's interesting. It's interesting that you think that.
Well, that you said that basically, just in a different way. You said they
Well, no,
wouldn't be
I
competitive.
said that if you're reasoning for women to have a space that they can be competitive in, that's why you create women's leagues. I don't see why that
No,
reasoning wouldn't extend to trans women
the
in
reasoning
their
is
own league,
multi-layered.
a separate new league.
There's multiple reasons for why a women's league exists.
Mm-hmm.
The other is for the protection from getting hurt by men. That's another
Well,
reason.
not in swimming, right?
Sure, not yeah, but I'm saying there's a lot of sports where
Sure,
that is the
maybe it's the
reason.
case that in some sports, like different types of situations will apply. MMA might need to have a different kind of like thinking about this than for again golf or swimming or lots of other things where being you know
If you're
physically
making those
injured isn't
exceptions,
necessarily
if you're making those exceptions, then it seems inconsistent that we should just consider trans women as women. It seems like obviously there's some exceptions where we cannot,
well
is by
so
your account.
so there are practical considerations in life. Life is kind of messy. Everything everywhere is a compromise. We end up doing things in lots of different places that are not 100% consistent but seem to work better. I'm okay having some inconsistencies between different sports leagues. That's not the kind of thing that would keep me up at night. But whether that means that trans women are women, this is the kind of challenge that I've heard lots of times, and it's simply a flawed understanding of set theory, right? X being a member of set A doesn't mean that it's identical to set A, right? So trans women can be women, black women can be women, old women can be women, right? Pregnant women can be women, but they're not all the same.
Yeah,
Those are
the
within
thing is
some
that,
set, right?
but right, but we're talking about a women's league, right? So they're all women. So all things being equal, they have guidelines to compete against each other, right? So it's like weight class, whatever. In
Age.
some sports they have age, they
Mm-hmm.
segregate by age, by weight class,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Sure, but at the end of the day, they historically have been cis women still against each other, when the only part where a true unfairness is introduced is when you put them up against a biological man.
No, that's not accurate. The unfairness that you in particular care about. There are always unfairnesses. It's a question, right? So this is like
Well,
this
can I
is the
define
big
what I mean
issue.
by unfair real quick? By unfair, I mean that it was designed for women, and the women see a biological man come in, and they think it is unfair because it says women's league,
Sure.
yet
That's an
they know for a
unbelievably
fact
specific meaning of the word unfair, right?
it is unfair. It goes,
Sure,
it's
but
like
there's lots
saying,
of things that could. We talked about how doping would be unfair. We talked about lots of things that could be unfair. If you're using an
sure,
aimbot
but
in Counter Strike, that's unfair, right?
this is something that is unfair.
Sure,
If it is a biological man
yeah.
in your sport, that is
You
by
see this as
definition unfair.
unfair. For me, I'm appealing to a broader understanding of what it means for something in sports to be fair, right?
Right. So
If you had 2-year-olds competing against 20-year-olds, that would probably be unfair, even though
well,
they're
I
of the
understand
same sex,
your
right?
argument is basically what's the only thing that is unfair is what the people making the rules determine it to
No,
be.
that is
That's basically
not even remotely my
okay.
argument. Couldn't
Okay.
be further from it.
Okay.
For me, what's unfair is something to do with something that feels to the people who are competing, or to the league, or to the viewers as unsportsmanly, as like this matchup doesn't make sense. This isn't, as you said, determining who's the best at whatever. This isn't doing that in a way that I think makes sense. That's what unfair means. And there's some good. There's lots of things that make a lot of sense to say this is unfair, or, right? If you say,
Well, you have to get
who's
past
the
my
best,
first barrier of
well,
unfairness first to get to the other one.
sure,
So my
but
first
wait,
barrier of
wait.
unfairness is, yeah.
Let me explain this. If I say I want a sports league to determine who's the best woman, and I'm going to include all female athletes, well, a 2-year-old is never going to win. 3-year-old is never going to win. 5-year-old is never going to win. 10-year-old is never going to win. 15-year-old is never going to win. 20-year-old is never going to win. You say, okay, I'm interested in who's the best 20 to 30-year-old, or 20 to 25-year-old, woman athlete in soccer, who, or let's say, not a team sport to make it
So
simpler,
we have
swimming,
adolescent, we
whatever,
have
right?
adult, and then
We've
we
got
have the senior.
categories because we don't care. Okay, who's maybe at some level, maybe we do like an all-star whatever thing, but usually we care about who's the best, like within a kind of narrow category, somebody within this school district or this state who's within this age range. So we get pretty picky about it, and it's not
No,
about
go to
like
the
who's
pro
the
leagues.
best.
We do not.
Sorry.
That's not true. That's not true. In the pro leagues, we do not. Your only threshold is
Oh,
to
sure.
meet
Okay.
the skill
Within the
level.
okay.
And be 18 at
Pro
least.
leagues is one specific thing, but I'd say like the vast majority of people are not in the pro leagues or trying to make it like most people are in school when they're doing sports, right? Probably the vast majority of people are not in the NFL.
Right,
They're
but
in
we're
college
saying, like,
teams, or right.
if we want to find out who's the best, that's what the pro leagues are there for. You could find out
Sure,
who's the best on earth, the
sure.
best in the United States, whatever.
Sure, maybe the pro leagues, but that's not the majority of athletes or the majority of athletics, right? So if we're talking
Sure.
about happening in schools, it's not who's the best. It's who's the best in this high school, who's the best in the school district, who's the best in the state, who's the best nationally within this particular, age range, right? So what we're
Yeah.
talking about as unfair, it would be unfair if people going to some state university had to compete against some pro league, right? we would consider that unfair. We're like, okay, this matchup isn't interesting.
Okay.
We don't learn anything from this because of course the
I've got
pro
a
league
question
is
for you.
better.
I want to see what you think of this. And
Please,
it's
yeah.
related to the topic. So, we're a Western society who adopts this trans ideology, right? What about when it comes to like the Olympics and we're competing against, let's say we have a trans female judo competitor or whatever, boxing, and we're like, yeah, she's a woman, whatever. And then the other countries who do absolutely reject this type of ideology, they say it's unfair.
Okay, they reject that ideology. They say it's unfair. Technically, they reject that type of person, presumably, because they're not allowing them to compete in that team.
Basically,
right?
you're forcing your culture onto them.
I mean, I'm not doing that
by getting
right?
them to accept. No, I'm saying, but
that will be up to the determination of the Olympic Committee. And if some countries are saying this is unfair, then they'll do what they always do when some country says it's unfair.
Me and you have just been elected to the committee. Now, what are we going to do?
Well, it seems like we'll have a lot to discuss, right? Because if it's like you and me need to come to consensus, then we'll need to figure this out, right?
I mean, I would naturally gravitate toward being sensitive to what most of the worldview is.
Wow. Okay, you would go by what most of the world says. Because what I would go by is I would evaluate this in a rational and empirical manner.
Yeah. So,
but you would go by what China says, what Saudi Arabia says. You want their culture to determine what you would choose.
We're talking about the Olympics, right? Why do I, as an American, get to bully around the rights of the rest of the countries just because I adopt this one ideology?
The Olympic Committee isn't American.
That's what I'm saying, is that we're talking.
No, the Olympic Committee isn't American. They're not. I don't think so. No,
I know that
they're not. Yeah.
So let me clear that up. Why would I force basically a very less than 1% of the Western culture onto the rest of the world and tell the rest of the world that you have to adhere to this ideology or else you just can not compete? Do we really have the right to
I think you're
disbelief the rest of the world when they
so
don't think
I'm gonna take you as this is like on good faith that this is something that you are really concerned about. I find it very difficult to believe, but I'm going to extend trust that you do actually care about this, and this is something that keeps you up at night.
It's an analogy. I'm just saying, like, what if the rest of the world, what if we have this scenario? It's very possible, right?
Yeah, I would bet you not only that it could come up, but that they already have standards in place. Do you know what they are? You seem to care about this a lot, but do you know what they are?
I mean, I would imagine it would be the testosterone levels and the whatever required amount of time there is that you be on hormone blockers or whatever. But
that's a reasonable thing to imagine. I mean, you're saying this is just a rhetorical device. You don't actually care about this.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm just I'm just giving you the analogy so that you could say,
I mean, like, whatever the Olympic Committee decides, that's what they'll do. I don't particularly care about it.
I'm asking you, right? Like I'm asking if me and you were the Olympic Committee, like I would think my vote would be to keep it uniform across what most of the world believe. When it comes to men and like,
is that how you generally live your life? That you
I'm saying in fairness to the rest of the world, in all fairness, I would not force, a culture to disrupt a
Why do you think American culture is so lacking? I mean, I think American culture is decent. I think American culture is pretty good.
I'm saying a culture that comes from America. I would not call this an American culture. I would say like it's a hyper minority within leftist culture in America. that's what it is. Why would I? Okay, so let me rephrase
Well,
it. Why
you
would
don't
I
like
let-
leftism and you don't like this ideology, so I don't think it has anything to do with the other countries. I think you just
Why
don't
not?
like it, but you think that I'm a lefty, so you think I'm going to want to be sensitive. Is that the?
No, no, that's not what I'm
Hmm.
saying. What I'm saying is that if we have this belief only exists in like a small pocket of liberal societies in
Mm-hmm.
the Western world, why would we let that dictate a international competition when most of the world does not believe in this?
Do you think
Why?
do you think that American culture that allows women to drive and vote is superior to um, other countries' culture, maybe that don't allow that to drive and to vote and to have their hair uncovered? Do you think that those are like good things about our culture compared to other countries that don't allow those things, or do you think that we should have more like that?
I feel like there's two different questions here. One is, do I value the American culture more than others? And the other is, would I force that culture onto others?
Let's just go with the first one. Just yeah, just
Sure,
that
yeah,
one.
I think a more liberal society is superior. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think there are definitely some so people in Islamic societies would say that liberalism is the most oppressive force on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally get their arguments for that
Mm.
because liberalism is oppressive towards being in Islam. Um, so I get it. That's why when it comes to an international competition, you want to try to be fair, the most fair to everybody. I would imagine to have a good
So
faith competition.
if the majority of countries were not accepting of women competing in the Olympics having their hair uncovered, and they say this is unacceptable, this is a disgrace, would you force your culture on them?
No,
No. So if the majority of countries participating in the Olympics said women should have to cover their hair, you would say as the Olympic Committee, or if that was your vote as the Olympic Committee, you personally you would declare, all right, American women have to
I
have
would I would think I
their
just
hair
don't
covered.
have yeah, I don't have more of a right
That's fascinating.
to yeah, because it's like a democracy now, right? Now we're trying to
The Olympic Committee
represent
is not a democracy, I don't think.
I
No,
know
it's
that
well,
you're asking
that's
two
what we're
different
talking about is the
questions,
Olympic
right?
Committee. We're not talking about
Oh, the
I don't know
committee.
the UN or right some kind of
So if
ideological
I'm the
struggle.
Olympic Committee,
Um,
I don't want to force my like just because I come from a certain country, I
you
don't
would
want
force
to
American women competing in the Olympics to cover their hair if
they
that's what
have
the
the choice to
majority of
not
they could just
I
not
wouldn't force
compete.
them. They have a choice. They have a
They
choice,
could
yeah.
not compete.
Sure.
But you would if they were to participate, obviously you're not going to come to their homes and force them, right? But I'm saying if they want to compete in the
No.
Olympics, they would be forced
Yeah.
to do that. Okay.
No, they would make the choice to do that. They wouldn't be
Well,
forced to.
okay.
They have the
If
choice
I say
whether
you're
or
not
not
allowed to
to
go to the store
yeah.
unless you do this, okay, I'm not. Uh, you're kind of splitting hairs here that don't really make sense, right? Uh,
Uh, no, I'm being
if I
clear.
want to do X, I have. If I want to participate in a sports event, I have to do something. And they say, well, you're not being forced to. You could just not participate. But
Right.
of course,
Power of choice. Yeah.
but their choice to cover their hair, to cover or not uncover their hair at the Olympics has been removed. Your decision would push their choice all the way back to even being in the Olympics.
It's not
They wouldn't be able to compete if they didn't do it.
yeah. Well, they could still make the choice to compete or not. It's up
I
to
guess they
them
would
if
get
they want to
like
cover their
penalized
hair.
and they would get thrown out or whatever. I guess they could. It would be
Yeah.
like a futile gesture, or
Yeah.
maybe not
It
futile,
would be
but
like, look,
um,
I would just have to explain to these women, like, look, The rest of the world hasn't caught up yet. Till they do, this is kind of the what we've the decision we've come to. You still have a choice on whether or not you want to compete. That's just the way the rest of the world is. We don't have the power.
Would
to
you
change
say
the whole
exactly
entire world.
that same speech to a trans woman
My daughter?
who is
Or
competing on an American team? Would you give her that exact same speech? The rest of the world hasn't caught up yet. This is the decision that we've come to. This is the choice that you're left with.
yeah, I mean, so as you know, as I learn to become more grounded in reality, I could say, like as I become a little more conservative, I've realized that there are not really many solutions out there. Most
Oh,
things
no.
are trade-offs.
Oh, sure. Of
Yeah,
course.
most
Yeah.
things are trade-offs.
I was about to be very sad for a moment.
No.
There's no
Yeah,
solutions.
there's
Yeah, no.
there's
Absolutely.
there's
Most things in life are trade-offs. There's no pure wins. You have to give up something for something you value more. That's usually
Yep.
almost always what life is. At best, sometimes you don't even have that good a choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And the utilitarian thing to do, I believe, is to include the rest of the world as much as I could. And if they have not culturally caught up to accepting trans people in their, communities and their societies, then I don't have any other choice, really. I can't force them to.
Well, you do have that. You do have that
Yeah.
choice. You just
I wouldn't.
wouldn't
in
make
faith,
that choice.
It wouldn't seem fair. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't seem
So,
fair.
am I right that this exercise has been an analogy for how you feel as a conservative person in the United States, that you feel that the left is pushing this on you and that's unfair? Is that a fair? Am I correctly drawing those lines there?
I feel that me getting I feel like the price for rejecting it is unfair.
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to just not like certain things and it just be fine. Like I don't like conservatives who are hyper how do you say? Like I'm a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are some conservatives that are not Christians in my opinion, and they swear up and down they are, but the way they carry themselves is not anywhere close to how Jesus would live, right? The way they carry themselves, and I find it completely hypocritical. Those type of people, I would just say, no, your brand of being a Christian, I don't agree with. I think it's cringe, and I don't like it, and I don't choose to follow it. So I think we should, but do they have a right to be here? Sure.
Sure, of
do
course.
they have a right to live life the way they want to? Sure. I just don't have to like it. I think that's a great freedom that we should be allowed, and I think it's being taken away a bit with the trans movement. I'm no longer free to just dislike them and without massive
without consequence,
social
backlash
ramifications.
to yourself.
Yeah. Right. I think the backlashes are unfair.
In the same way that you feel you don't suffer backlash when you speak out and say, these conservatives, these basically heretical, I would call them heretics.
Yeah.
People who say,
Heretics,
people who say Jesus came to make me rich.
Or I could just say like I don't like communists, but whatever, we have them living here, or whoever it is. There's a bunch of groups and people and movements and music and all kinds of shit I don't like, right? But we have the freedom of speech, right? We have the First Amendment where we get to talk about it, but it's just I just don't agree with the social stigma of talking about trans people like to where it's gotten. I really don't like that part about it.
Is that something that you're interested in? Is that something that you're open to understanding in more detail? But I'm interested in understanding more of what that's like for you, because I don't have as much access to that perspective of what it's like
Yeah, sure, definitely.
But
So
but
this
are you
conversation
open
right
also
now,
to understanding more of why that backlash exists to that degree?
I I doubt I would be able to
Hmm.
understand it.
Okay.
I
Well,
don't
no.
I don't think I have the
Thank you.
ability. I'm too
Thank you
busy
for being
brained,
honest. I
and
appreciate that. Absolutely.
yeah, I just thought long and hard about it for a number of years, and I just don't see a good reason for that to exist. I think that
For
like
sorry
I said,
for trans people or the backlash.
the backlash.
The
I just
backlash.
don't. I don't. Yeah, I don't like the back. Like if the backlash weren't so heavy, I
Mm.
would probably, like it sucks having this conversation. I feel like I have to walk a tightrope and be
Mm.
very careful
Well,
because I don't.
if this
It's not
helps,
life threatening to
I feel
me.
the same way. Talking to you.
Do you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel
Okay,
that I mean,
but based on what I say, right?
mhm.
Not on what you say.
Based on
Do you feel like you'll make a mistake, or is it just platforming
no,
me is a
I
mistake?
don't feel that I'm going to be canceled if I speak too openly to you. And you're saying that you do feel like some societal backlash if you speak too openly to me, and
I feel like I
an
can't
imbalance in
speak.
terms of this conversation. But I do feel that I have to be careful um, in terms of a level of um, patience with a large difference in our perspective that um, um, because I feel frankly like some of your viewpoints to me feel kind of ignorant or feel like you're lacking information or you haven't had life experiences that I've had or met people that I have, but it's not useful in conversation to just to be impatient or um, to be unkind or to be right to be all these kind of things.
Yeah.
I have feelings that come up for me when I talk to you about this topic, um, and I'm putting work and putting patience into making sure that I'm hearing you out and hearing you clearly and trying to think of
Mm.
things that are productive for me to say to you rather than probably what it sounds like you've gotten in a lot of other spaces of,
Oh, I
you're
appreciate
a
that.
piece of shit, fuck off, I don't want to see you, whatever, right?
Yeah,
It sounds like that's been more of your experience a lot of the
it's
time.
kind of like
Um,
it's massive ignorance to me is what I
mm,
encounter. So if I just say I don't really believe that trans women should be in women's sports, and we can't even have a conversation about that after that. It just becomes, well, you're a transphobe.
mm-hmm,
Like we can't even expand on that idea, and you're most of these people don't even care about trying to change my mind maybe or give me information or a different perspective. It just seems like it's just easier just to go that route.
mm,
And when I criticize conservatives about some of their beliefs, they're happy to talk about it in a way that's not confrontational.
well,
You know,
but you're with them. You're on their side, right? It's always easier to.
well, now it
Okay,
wasn't
I'm gonna
always
be
that
honest. It
way.
can be
It
tough
was
as a lefty to talk to other leftists, other
I was
lefties
voting.
about
Listen, I mean, I was a Bernie bro,
them.
but I voted. I was extremely upset when Hillary beat him in the primary.
Mm.
That was my initial kind of like step away from the Democratic Party.
Oh,
I
interesting.
and I just found that to be. It felt like I was a Democrat for what I believed were good reasons, right?
Mm,
Like
mm-hmm,
they're more fair, they're more honest, they're less racist, they're more progressive, all that good stuff, right?
mm-hmm.
And then to see them to see, I don't know, I felt like there was rumors that it was like a kneecapping Bernie that um I'm not sure if I still believe that today, I mean, there are good arguments to make that Hillary was just a more popular candidate than Bernie was. And I didn't know shit about socialism back then. And that's what Bernie was running as, a socialist. And after I learned about socialism, I said, well, holy shit, no wonder he couldn't pull it off, you know? So I kind of got more as I was upset because I liked Bernie and I liked his ideas, and that his loss got me into educating myself a little bit more on politics and things like that. And it's through educating myself where I slowly kind of became more conservative. And it's kind of weird that way, right? Like the difference between me being left and right was education.
Right. And that definitely, if that's your experience, then it's hard not to feel like, well, okay, this is my trajectory. I just learned more about the world, and now I've moved in this direction. Is it possible that could continue, or that people who haven't moved in that direction are missing information?
There's still plenty I disagree with, you know, mainstream conservatives about. You know, like marijuana being legal. I'm surprised it hasn't been like 10 years since the legalization of it. Some things are just abortion's a very hard one. I kind of seem to the safe position for me right now, because we could find out more later, is that maybe the cutoff should be when they say consciousness begins, and that's when a life should be protected. You know, things like that. But you know, we could definitely get into those other topics another time. I just thought it would be interesting to kind of give you my trajectory of my beliefs and how I kind of changed. I haven't always been a quote unquote conservative. I don't even know if I would characterize myself that way, but I definitely would say I'm more to the right than I am to the left. I'd probably describe myself as like center right.
Okay. Well, hey, I felt like we had a lot of productive conversation here.
Yeah,
Really
I enjoyed
appreciate
it.
you
Thanks for
coming
staying
on
on
to talk. Yeah.
Thanks for staying on as long as you have. I know it's late where you are.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, here,
we could do
we should do this
gun
again.
control or something next time.
Sorry?
I said maybe we could pick a topic like gun control or something next time. I don't know where you stand on that, but that would be interesting.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like there's a lot to flesh out in this conversation. If you're interested
sure, we
in,
could revisit this one.
But yeah, the final the final point I was going to make half an hour ago, just when it comes to no, that's okay. I mean, it's been interesting stuff. Just when it comes to sports and to competition, I feel strongly that fundamentally what we choose as categories for sports is what's an interesting competition. That's fundamentally, in my view, what it comes down to. We want to see a fight that's going to be kind of close. Occasionally it's fun to watch, you know, a total
blowout.
You know, that could be fun. But if that were every fight, it would be like you would just stop watching. You want it to be like something that you're not sure what's going to happen going in, right? You want to have the opportunity to be surprised.
I agree.
My point about picking and choosing what we care about is that we do police things like somebody being trans or a African woman having too high testosterone, but we don't police in the same way something like, you know, if Michael Phelps, he's like, he talked about smoking pot, he liked smoking pot, and he won like whatever 9 Olympic gold medals for swimming. He has like slightly webbed fingers or something. He like metabolizes in like a slightly different way. His heart is like whatever. He has the perfect proportions of his legs. He's like a he's Aquaman, right?
Yeah, we got that in a lot of sports. We got a lot of sports got a Michael Phelps, you know.
Yeah,
Exceptional people.
And we don't police that because that's within the kind of variation that we've accepted as okay. And I just want to highlight that there are certain things that we choose to say this is within a variation that's okay, and this is a variation that's not okay. And it's just something to think about, and it's something we can revisit next time when we talk.
Yeah.
But yeah. Thank you so much for going on. Yeah. If you're interested in talking more,
I was gonna say it might be possible that in the future we might ban fishmen from joining swimming competitions.
Yeah.
This might be
but yeah, take care. Have a good night.
You take care. Have a good one.
Bye bye.